The Grand Hall of Zarelian Prime was filled with towering warriors, noble elites, and ambitious suitors from across the galaxy. They had gathered for one purpose: the chance to win the hand of Princess Soraya, heir to the mighty Zarelian Empire. Dressed in royal blue robes, Soraya sat on a raised throne, her golden eyes scanning the room. She looked at each suitor with the same cold expression. Some were kings of distant worlds, others were generals with armies at their command. Every one of them was strong, powerful, and respected. And yet, she had no interest in any of them. The royal herald stepped forward, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. Let the first challenger step forward. A massive warrior, at least 8 feet tall, walked confidently toward the throne. His name was Lord Vargoth, a warlord known for conquering entire star systems. His red armor gleamed under the bright lights, and his 4 muscular arms flexed as he bowed. Princess Soraya, Vargoth said, his voice like rolling thunder, no one in this room is as worthy as I am. I will give you power beyond imagination. Together, we will rule the galaxy. Soraya raised an eyebrow. Power? She asked. You speak as if I am weak. Vargoth hesitated. No, but together. Next. Soraya interrupted. Gasps spread through the hall. The warlord's face darkened with anger, but he stepped back. No one dared challenge the princess's decision. One by one, more suitors stepped forward. Each one spoke of strength, power, and what they could offer her. A wealthy prince promised riches beyond measure. A fierce warrior declared he would fight in her name. A scientist spoke of advanced technology that could expand the empire. Each time, Soraya's answer was the same. Next. The emperor, sitting beside her, sighed in frustration. His long silver cape draped over his shoulders, and his face showed the weight of the empire on his shoulders. Soraya, he whispered, you must choose someone. She turned to him. I will not choose a man who sees me as a prize. The emperor rubbed his temples. Then what do you seek? Soraya did not answer. She did not know. But she knew she would not settle for someone who only wanted power, wealth, or a throne. Just as the room was growing tense, the grand doors of the hall swung open. The guards turned sharply, gripping their weapons. A human stepped inside. The room fell silent. Humans were rare in Zarelian space. They were small compared to the towering aliens, physically weaker than most species, and had no great armies or powerful empires. And yet this human walked forward with quiet confidence. His name was Daniel Carter. He was not a warrior, not a noble, and certainly not a suitor. He was an Earth diplomat, here only to discuss trade agreements between humanity and the Zarelians. Daniel stopped at the edge of the hall, confused by the silence. Am I interrupting something? Laughter erupted from the crowd. Some aliens shook their heads, amused by the tiny human who had walked in at the wrong moment. The emperor, irritated by the distraction, motioned for the guards to escort Daniel out. But before they could, Soraya spoke. Wait. The room froze. Everyone turned to her, stunned. The emperor narrowed his eyes. What is it, Soraya? She looked at Daniel, curiosity flashing in her golden eyes. Who is he? One of the royal advisors whispered quickly, a human, Your Highness. He is a diplomat, not a suitor. Soraya tilted her head, studying Daniel. He was different. Unlike the other men in the hall, he wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't boasting about his strength or offering her wealth. He was just standing there. Daniel cleared his throat. Look, if this is some kind of royal meeting, I don't mean to intrude. I was just supposed to meet the Trade Council. Soraya smirked. You are bold to walk into the Emperor's chamber uninvited. Daniel sighed. It was an accident. But, since I'm already here, I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Daniel Carter, from Earth. He scratched the back of his head. And I have no idea what's happening right now. The warriors laughed again, shaking their heads. A human. What a joke. But Soraya wasn't laughing. She was intrigued. Without realizing it, the first spark had been lit. She had rejected every suitor in the galaxy, but for the first time in years, someone had caught her interest. And he had no idea what was about to happen next. Daniel Carter stood awkwardly in the center of the Grand Zarelian Hall, feeling the weight of 100 eyes staring at him. The laughter of the alien nobles and warriors still echoed in the air, but he ignored it. He had no idea why Princess Soraya was looking at him with such intense curiosity, but he knew one thing. He hadn't come here for this. The Emperor sighed and leaned forward on his throne. Soraya, enough games. He is not a suitor. Let us continue with the ceremony. But Soraya didn't look away. She rested her chin on her hand, still studying Daniel like an interesting puzzle. "Tell me, human," she said, her golden eyes sharp. "What makes you different from the men standing before me?" Daniel blinked. "Ah, I wasn't planning to ask for your hand in marriage." Laughter erupted again, this time louder. Some of the nobles even clapped, amused by the human's bluntness. Even Soraya smirked slightly. "So, you do not desire power, a throne, wealth?" Daniel shook his head. "Nope, I just wanted to discuss trade routes, maybe get a good meal, and go home without getting involved in whatever this is." Soraya's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. "Interest. Fascinating," she murmured. One of the suitors, a nobleman named Roker, stepped forward angrily. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his silver armor gleamed in the light. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "A weak, insignificant human is being entertained while true warriors are ignored." Soraya turned her gaze to him. "I have not chosen him. I am merely curious." The Emperor, growing impatient, waved his hand. "Enough of this. Guards, escort the human back to his chambers." The royal guard stepped forward, but before they could reach Daniel, Roker sneered. "If he is so different, let him prove it." Daniel frowned. "Prove what?" Roker crossed his arms. "The princess seeks something unique. She tests all her suitors through the traditional trials." He smirked. "Let the human take one of them." The hall fell silent. Daniel looked around. "Hold on. I don't remember signing up for any trials." Soraya leaned forward slightly. "An interesting idea." The Emperor gave her a sharp look. "You cannot be serious." Soraya lifted a hand. "I have no interest in the others, but a human has never taken part in our trials. Perhaps it will amuse me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Amuse you? Wow, thanks." She smirked. "You may refuse, of course." Daniel sighed. He could see the smug expressions of the suitors, the way they looked down on him like he was some weak creature that didn't belong. That look annoyed him. He crossed his arms. "Fine. I'll do it." The crowd gasped. The warriors muttered among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. Roker laughed. "Brave, but foolish. You will regret this, human." Daniel exhaled. Yeah. What exactly am I supposed to do?" A Zarelian advisor stepped forward and gestured toward a massive stone pillar in the center of the hall. "The first trial is simple. You must retrieve the princess's crest from the top of that pillar. You may not use weapons, only your body and your mind." Daniel stared at the 40-foot-tall stone pillar, completely smooth with no handholds. He rubbed his face. "Of course it is." The suitors smirked, expecting him to fail immediately. Soraya tilted her head. "Do you accept the challenge?" Daniel looked at her, then back at the pillar. He could walk away. No one would blame him. But something about Soraya's intrigued expression made him want to prove them wrong. He sighed. "All right, let's do this." The trial begins. Daniel walked toward the pillar, studying it carefully. It was too tall to jump, and too smooth to climb. The other suitors had succeeded by sheer strength, digging their powerful fingers into the stone or using their claws. Daniel had none of that. But humans were clever. He took a few steps back and scanned the environment. Then he grinned. Got it. He sprinted toward a nearby column, jumped, kicked off the side, and grabbed onto a hanging banner. Using his weight, he swung forward, landing on a ledge above the trial area. Before the guards could react, he sprinted across the ledge and leaped onto the top of the pillar, grabbing the princess's crest. The room went dead silent. Soraya's eyes widened. Daniel casually twirled the crest in his fingers. "That good enough for you?" Gasps filled the air. Some warriors stared in disbelief. Rokar's face twisted in anger. Soraya laughed softly. It was the first time anyone had heard her laugh during the trials. She stood up, stepping forward slightly. "Interesting." Daniel jumped down, landing with a soft thud, and tossed the crest back toward Soraya. She caught it smoothly, her golden eyes locked on him. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. "Clever." Daniel smirked. "That's humans for you." Soraya turned to the suitors. "Strength is not the only measure of worth. Perhaps we have underestimated Earth's people." Rokar clenched his fists. "He is still weak." Soraya glanced at him. Weakness is refusing to accept defeat. The suitors fell silent. Daniel, dusting himself off, sighed. "So, does this mean I'm done?" Soraya's smirk returned. "Not quite." Daniel groaned. Great. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. The air inside the grand hall of Zarelian Prime felt heavier than before. The laughter had faded, replaced by curious whispers and stunned silence. No one had expected a human to succeed in the first trial, especially not through cleverness rather than strength. Daniel Carter adjusted his jacket and exhaled. "So, are we done now?" he asked, glancing at Princess Soraya. Soraya, standing with the golden crest in her hands, smiled slightly. "You have surprised me, human, but one trial does not make a champion." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, but I'm not here to be a champion. I was just trying to get out of an awkward situation." The Emperor, watching everything from his throne, leaned forward. "Soraya, this is unnecessary. The human has no place in these trials." Rokar, still fuming from his humiliation, stepped forward. He should be disqualified immediately. Soraya's golden eyes flashed with amusement. "And why is that? He completed the trial, did he not?" Rokar clenched his fists but remained silent. He couldn't argue against the rules. Soraya turned to Daniel, tilting her head. "You are different from the others, Daniel Carter. You do not seek power, yet you face every challenge without hesitation. Tell me, what is it that drives you?" Daniel hesitated. The truth was, he didn't really know. He hadn't planned to get involved in alien royal traditions, but something about Soraya's confidence and the arrogance of the suitors had made him want to prove himself. He shrugged. "I guess I just don't like being underestimated." Soraya smiled. "That I understand." The next trial begins. The room buzzed with excitement as the next trial was announced. This time, it was a test of endurance, a task designed to push competitors to their limits. "The trial of the burning path," the herald declared. "A test of willpower. The one who walks the farthest will prove their strength of mind." Daniel watched as the floor in front of him shifted, revealing a long, glowing pathway. The air above it shimmered with heat. He quickly realized it wasn't actual fire. It was a high-energy force field designed to cause immense discomfort to anyone who stepped on it. Soraya took her seat again, watching with mild curiosity. "Let's see how far the human lasts." Daniel sighed. "Great. Another alien obstacle course." Rokar smirked. "This time, your tricks will not save you, human. This is about raw endurance." The first suitor, a massive Zyrelian warrior, stepped onto the path. His muscles tensed, his sharp teeth gritted. The energy beneath his feet sent waves of heat through his body, making his nerves scream. He took 6 steps before falling to his knees. The pain was too much. The next warrior lasted 8 steps. Another suitor managed 10 before stumbling off the path, gasping for air. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stepped up to the edge of the path and took a deep breath. The floor hummed with energy, waiting to punish him. He took his first step. Heat surged through his body like lightning, but he forced himself to keep walking. One step, another, then another. The crowd watched in silence. Daniel wasn't as strong as the others, but he had something different, human stubbornness. He thought about every time someone had doubted humans, every time he had been called weak or unworthy. Step, step, step. His legs trembled, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. The room filled with murmurs. How is he still standing? No human should be able to endure that. Daniel took another step, his vision blurred. Sweat dripped down his face. His boots felt like they were melting, but he refused to stop. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed, rolling off the path. The hall fell silent. Soraya's golden eyes flickered with something new. Respect. An advisor stepped forward, checking the results. He looked at the numbers, then turned toward the crowd. Daniel Carter has set a new record, 13 steps. Roker's face turned red with rage. The suitors around him were stunned. Daniel, still gasping for air, gave a weak grin. Guess that's another one down. The princess's interest. Soraya stood and slowly approached Daniel, who was still sitting on the floor, catching his breath. She crouched slightly, her golden eyes studying him. "You are not like the others," she said softly. Daniel looked up at her. "Yeah, I get that a lot." She smirked. "You are weaker than my kind, yet you do not back down. You feel pain, yet you do not quit. Why?" Daniel exhaled. "Because sometimes giving up isn't an option." Soraya was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time, she extended her hand to him. The room gasped. The princess never helped any suitor. Daniel hesitated, then took her hand. Her grip was strong, but not unkind. She helped him to his feet. The emperor watched carefully, his face unreadable. Soraya turned back to the room. "The next trial will begin soon." Then she glanced at Daniel, her golden eyes gleaming. "Try not to disappoint me, human." Daniel smirked. No promises. As the crowd whispered in shock, one thing was clear. Princess Soraya was no longer just amused by the human. She was intrigued. And that changed everything. The grand halls of Xyrelian Prime still buzzed with whispers and murmurs. The suitors stood in quiet frustration, watching as Princess Soraya had, for the first time, shown interest in someone, a human. Daniel Carter stretched his aching legs as he walked through the palace corridors. His body still burned from the trial of the burning path, but he refused to show weakness. He had won that round, but he wasn't sure if it was a victory or a trap. A deep voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are making powerful enemies, human." Daniel turned to see Rokar, the towering noble, standing in the shadows of the hallway. His silver armor gleamed, and his dark eyes burned with anger. Daniel sighed. "Let me guess, you're not here to congratulate me." Rokar smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You amuse yourself with these games, but you are out of your depth. The princess is not for you." Daniel crossed his arms. "And who decides that? You?" Rokar stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "The Empire decides. The princess must choose a mate strong enough to rule beside her. You are weak, human. You do not belong here." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, then chuckled. Rokar frowned. "What is funny?" Daniel shook his head. You keep saying I'm weak, but you're the one scared of me." Rokar's jaw tightened. "Watch yourself, human." Daniel shrugged. "Or what? You'll challenge me to a duel? I don't fight fair, just so you know." For a moment, Rokar looked like he wanted to strike him, but he controlled himself. Instead, he leaned in and whispered, "Enjoy your small victories while they last. You won't survive the next trial." Then, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Daniel watched him go, a cold feeling settling in his gut. Whatever came next, it wasn't going to be fair. The third trial. The hunt begins. The next morning, the competitors gathered in an arena surrounded by towering trees and dense jungle mist. It was time for the third trial. The hunt. A Xyrelian advisor stepped forward. This trial is simple. Deep within this forest lies a rare beast, the Xyrellus. It is swift, dangerous, and highly intelligent. Your task is to capture it alive and return with it to the palace. Daniel frowned. Capture it, not kill it. Soraya, seated on a high balcony above the arena, smirked. Any fool can kill, but only the skilled can capture. Let us see if you are clever enough, human. Daniel glanced at the other competitors. Rokar and the other suitors were grinning, as if they already knew something he didn't. The horn sounded, and the competitors rushed into the jungle. The trap. Daniel moved carefully through the thick jungle, scanning his surroundings. The air was humid, and strange alien creatures chittered from the treetops. He had no weapons, just his wits and a small tracking device given to each competitor. Then he heard a rustling sound behind him. He turned, but saw nothing. Then, snap! The ground beneath him gave way, and Daniel plunged into a deep pit, landing hard on the damp soil. Well, that's just great. Laughter echoed from above. Daniel looked up to see Rokar and two other suitors standing at the edge of the pit, smirking down at him. What do you know? Rokar sneered. The human fell into a hole. I told you he wouldn't last. Daniel groaned. Wow, you dug a hole. That's some real advanced strategy right there. Rokar's smirk didn't fade. Stay here and rot, human. The princess will soon forget you. With that, he and the others walked away, leaving Daniel trapped. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, time to get out of here. The escape. Daniel examined the pit. The walls were slick with mud, but there were enough roots and rocks for him to climb. He took a deep breath and started scaling the wall. His fingers slipped, but he kept going, pulling himself up inch by inch. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His arms burned, but he gritted his teeth. Step, pull, step, pull. Finally, he reached the top and rolled onto the jungle floor, gasping for breath. Not bad, a voice said. Daniel whirled around to see Soraya standing behind him, arms crossed, watching him with amusement. How long have you been standing there? Daniel asked, still catching his breath. Soraya smirked. Long enough. I wanted to see if you would give up. Daniel sat up. And? Soraya's golden eyes studied him. You never do you? Daniel chuckled. Not really my style. Soraya's gaze softened for a moment. Then she turned. Come, the beast you seek is this way. Daniel blinked. Wait, are you helping me? Soraya gave him a sidelong glance. Perhaps I am simply curious to see how you handle it. Daniel grinned. I'll take it. Together, they moved through the jungle, disappearing into the mist. The jungle was thick with mist, the towering alien trees swaying in the soft breeze. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, creatures moving, whispering leaves, the crack of twigs under unseen footsteps. Daniel Carter moved carefully, following Princess Soraya as she led the way. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim jungle light, sharp and focused. Are you sure this is the right way? Daniel whispered. Soraya glanced back at him. Do you doubt me, human? Daniel smirked. Not at all. I just don't want to end up as dinner for some alien predator. Soraya let out a quiet chuckle. Then try to keep up. The two of them continued their silent pursuit of the Xyrellus, the rare beast they had to capture for the trial. The other competitors were scattered throughout the jungle, likely hunting in packs. Daniel knew they had the advantage in strength, weapons, and experience. But he had something else, his mind. The hunt begins, After several minutes of careful tracking, Soraya suddenly raised a hand, signaling Daniel to stop. He froze. She pointed to a clearing up ahead, and there it was, the Exorilus. The creature was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was sleek and powerful, its body covered in dark, shimmering scales. 4 muscular legs dug into the ground as it sniffed the air, sensing the presence of intruders. Its eyes were sharp and intelligent, glowing with a bright silver hue. Daniel crouched beside Soraya. "That thing looks fast." Soraya nodded. "It is, and incredibly dangerous. One wrong move, and it will rip you apart." Daniel sighed. "Well, that's comforting." Soraya smirked. "Do you have a plan?" Daniel thought for a moment, his mind racing. The other competitors were probably trying to overpower the beast with brute strength, which meant they were likely failing. But Daniel had watched animals on Earth. He knew that sometimes the best way to capture a wild creature was not through force, but through understanding. "Yeah," Daniel whispered. "I have an idea. But you're not going to like it." Soraya arched an eyebrow. "Now I am interested." A different approach. Instead of attacking, Daniel slowly lowered himself to the ground, making himself smaller and less threatening. The Exorilus snapped its head toward him, growling softly. Soraya tensed. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "It will kill you." But Daniel didn't move. He kept his eyes on the creature, making sure not to stare directly into its gaze, a sign of aggression. Then he did something no one else had tried. He extended his hand, slowly, carefully. The Exorilus tilted its head, uncertain. No one had ever treated it with curiosity before. No one had ever tried to understand it. Soraya watched in stunned silence as the Exorilus took a hesitant step forward, sniffing the air around Daniel. Then, it lowered its head slightly, considering him. Daniel smiled. "That's it. I'm not your enemy." Soraya whispered, "I cannot believe this." Daniel slowly reached toward the Exorilus's neck, where a small control band had been placed, likely to track the creature. With a quick, careful motion, he clipped a capture tag onto it. The device beeped softly, marking Daniel as the one who had completed the trial. The Exorilus growled softly but did not attack. Daniel stood up, dusting himself off. "And that, my dear princess, is how you win without a fight." Soraya stared at him for a long moment, then let out a small laugh. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met." Daniel smirked. "I get that a lot." The return to the palace. When Daniel and Soraya returned to the palace with the Exorilus trailing behind them, the crowd erupted in shock. The other suitors had failed to capture the beast. Some had returned wounded, others had given up completely. But Daniel, he had succeeded without violence. The emperor sat on his grand throne, watching Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "You continue to surprise us, human." Daniel shrugged. "I just did what made sense." Rokar, standing with the defeated suitors, clenched his fists. His hatred for Daniel was now stronger than ever. But Soraya, she was smiling. The human had not only won the trial, he had won her attention. The grand hall of Xorelian Prime was filled with tension. Daniel Carter, the lone human among towering alien warriors, had done the impossible. He had completed the trials, not with brute strength, but with intelligence and determination. As he stood before the emperor, the murmurs of the crowd surrounded him. The noblemen and warriors of Xorelia couldn't believe what they had witnessed. A human, a species they considered weaker, had captured the Exorilus without a fight. Princess Soraya sat on her throne, her golden eyes locked on Daniel. "You never stop surprising me, human." Daniel smirked. "I try my best." The emperor leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You have completed the trials, Daniel Carter, but there is one final test, one that cannot be won with tricks or cleverness." Daniel exhaled. "Of course there is." The hall grew silent as the emperor continued. "The princess must now choose a kingdom's expectations." Soraya rose from her throne, her movements graceful yet commanding. She turned her gaze toward the suitors, mighty warriors and nobles, each one expecting to be chosen. The Xyrelian council members stood along the edges of the hall, their expressions stern. To them, tradition was everything. The future of the empire depended on Soraya's choice of a strong, powerful mate. One of the council members stepped forward. "Princess, you must consider the strength of the empire. The human has proven resourceful, but he is no warrior." Rokar, still seething from his losses, sneered. "He is an outsider, a weakling. Choosing him would be an insult to our people." Daniel glanced at Soraya, watching her carefully. He could tell that this decision wasn't just about her heart. It was about her duty. Soraya's face remained calm, but inside, a battle rage. She had spent her life rejecting suitors, refusing to be seen as a prize for power-hungry men. Yet now, for the first time, someone had stood before her as an equal, not as a conqueror, but as a man who refused to be controlled. She stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "I will make my choice. The decision." The hall fell into complete silence. Soraya slowly walked toward Daniel, her golden eyes locked onto his. Every step she took sent waves of shock through the crowd. Rokar's face twisted in rage. The council members exchanged nervous glances. Daniel, standing tall despite the pressure, met Soraya's gaze. He wasn't sure what she would say, but one thing was clear. This moment would change everything. Finally, Soraya stopped just inches away from him. She reached for his hand, lifting it for all to see. "I choose him." Gasps filled the hall. The emperor's face remained unreadable, but his fingers tightened slightly on his throne. The council members looked horrified. And Rokar, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This is madness," he shouted. "You cannot choose a human." Soraya turned to him, her golden eyes burning. "I have chosen, Rokar. Strength is not only measured in muscle and war. Daniel Carter has proven himself in ways no Xyrelian ever has." She looked back at Daniel. "He does not seek power. He does not try to control me. He stands as an equal, and that is why I choose him." Daniel blinked. He hadn't expected her to defend him like this. He had come here for simple diplomacy, but now he was standing at the center of a decision that could shake an empire. "The Emperor speaks." The Emperor finally stood, his deep voice echoing across the hall. "The princess has spoken." The murmurs died instantly. He stepped forward, his sharp gaze studying Daniel. "Do you understand what this means, human?" Daniel swallowed but nodded. "I do." The Emperor exhaled, then turned to the nobles. "Tradition is the foundation of our people, but the strongest empires do not survive by tradition alone. They survive by adapting, by evolving. If Soraya sees strength in this human, then we must acknowledge it." The tension in the room shifted. Some nobles still looked displeased, but no one dared to challenge the Emperor's words. Finally, the Emperor turned to his daughter. "Soraya, you have made your choice. Let us see if the human is truly worthy of it." Soraya smiled. "He already is." The aftermath. As the ceremony ended, Soraya and Daniel stood side by side, away from the crowd. Daniel let out a long breath. "Well, that was dramatic." Soraya chuckled. "Did you expect anything less?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but I have to ask, are you sure about this?" Soraya tilted her head. "Are you asking if I regret my choice?" Daniel hesitated. "I just don't want you to." Soraya placed a hand on his chest, silencing him. "Daniel, for the first time, I have chosen something for myself. No duty, no expectations, just a choice that is mine alone." Daniel looked into her golden eyes, and for the first time, he truly understood. This wasn't just about a throne or an empire. This was about her freedom. He smiled. "Then I guess we make this work." Soraya smirked. "Indeed, human. Let us see what the future holds." As they stood together under the alien stars, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The grand halls of Xyrelian Prime were silent. The moment Princess Soraya declared her choice, the empire had been shaken. Never in history had a human been chosen as a suitor, let alone one who had defeated all others through intelligence rather than brute strength. Daniel Carter stood beside Soraya, still processing the weight of her decision. He had arrived on Xyrelia as a simple diplomat, but now he had been thrust into something far beyond his expectations. The nobles, warriors, and council members still whispered in disbelief. Some were shocked, others were furious. And standing among them, with rage burning in his eyes, was Rokar. He could not accept this. Rokar's challenge. As Soraya and Daniel turned to leave the throne room, Rokar suddenly stepped forward. His voice was sharp, filled with fury. "This is not over." Soraya narrowed her eyes. "You dare challenge my decision." Rokar's fists clenched. A choice made from foolishness must be corrected. He pointed at Daniel. "He is no warrior, no leader. If he wishes to stand at your side, let him prove it in combat." The hall fell into a tense silence. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. Of course it comes down to this. The Emperor, observing everything with a calculating gaze, finally spoke. "A challenge has been issued. By tradition, it must be honored." Daniel frowned. "Let me guess. I don't get a choice in this, do I?" Soraya turned to him, her expression serious but calm. "You can refuse. No law forces you to fight." Daniel glanced around the room. He could feel the doubt, the judgment, the expectation of failure. He wasn't a trained warrior like Rokar, but he had come this far. He exhaled. "All right, let's do this." Rokar grinned, stepping into the center of the arena, rolling his shoulders. "This will be over quickly." Daniel muttered, "Yeah, for you." The duel begins. The royal dueling grounds were a circular arena, surrounded by towering stone pillars. The floor was made of smooth black metal, and the air hummed with anticipation. Soraya sat on the throne, watching with sharp eyes. The Emperor remained silent, his expression unreadable. Daniel stood on one side of the arena, hands at his sides, heart pounding. Rokar stood on the other, grinning with confidence. A Xyrelian official raised a hand. "The duel will continue until one yields, or is unable to fight." The signal was given. Rokar moved fast, far faster than Daniel expected. His massive frame was deceptive, his strength paired with shocking agility. Daniel barely dodged the first strike, a powerful swing aimed at his head. He ducked, rolling to the side. The air rushed past his ear, and he realized that if the hit had landed, he wouldn't be standing right now. "You cannot win," Rokar sneered. Daniel exhaled. "I've heard that before." Outsmarting the warrior. Daniel knew he couldn't win through brute force. If he fought Rokar's way, he would lose. So he decided to fight his own way. As Rokar lunged again, Daniel didn't dodge. He feinted. He moved at the last second, causing Rokar to overextend. Using the moment, Daniel grabbed a loose piece of fabric hanging from Rokar's armor and yanked hard. Rokar stumbled forward, losing balance for a second. The crowd gasped. Soraya's eyes sparked with amusement. Rokar growled, turning quickly, but Daniel was already moving. He didn't fight straightforwardly. He fought with distraction, movement, and unpredictability. Each time Rokar tried to land a powerful hit, Daniel would sidestep, redirect, or bait him into a mistake. Frustration grew on Rokar's face. "Enough games," he roared, charging forward with full force. Daniel smirked. "Thanks for the opening." At the last second, Daniel dropped low, swept his leg out, and sent Rokar crashing face first into the ground. A thunderous silence followed. Daniel stood up, dusting off his clothes. "So, do you yield, or should I let you trip over yourself again?" The crowd exploded in shock. Rokar, humiliated, slammed his fist against the ground. But he couldn't deny it. He had been outmaneuvered. Soraya stood from her throne. Enough. The duel is over. She walked toward Daniel, standing before him, a small smile on her lips. Once again, you surprised me. Daniel smirked. What can I say? Humans are full of surprises. The Emperor nodded. It is decided. The princess has made her choice, and it will be honored. Rokar, still kneeling, gritted his teeth but said nothing. He had been defeated, fairly. A new future. That night, under the glowing twin moons of Zorelia, Daniel and Soraya stood on the balcony overlooking the Empire. Daniel leaned against the railing. So, what now? Soraya smirked. Now, you must get used to being the most talked-about person in the Empire. Daniel chuckled. Great, just what I wanted. Soraya looked at him, her golden eyes soft for the first time. You fought not for power, not for a throne, but simply because you refused to back down. That is why I chose you. Daniel met her gaze. And you fought for the right to choose your own path. That's why I respect you. For a moment, they just stood there, the weight of everything finally settling in. Then, Soraya did something unexpected. She gently took his hand. Daniel blinked in surprise, but he didn't pull away. Soraya smiled. This is only the beginning, human. Daniel smirked. Yeah, but I think we'll make a great team. And with that, under the alien stars, a new chapter for both their worlds began.